Hello guys, very good evening. So in the last session, we have discussed about some basics interview questions of Springboard, which is very useful for beginners and who is going to start the Springboard and student. So in these sessions, we are going to discuss some of the Springboard interview questions, that is important annotations. So annotations are nothing but a metadata of something. So it indicates at the red sign. So let's dive into the topic. The first and foremost annotation is at the rate of a Spring Boot application. So actually, this is a annotations which is provided by the Spring Boot. So these annotations will indicate the main class of Spring Boot applications. So the class which is annotated at the top level of the class using a thread of Spring Boot applications, it indicates that this is the main class of our entire project. So basically the Spring Boot applications, it is composed of three annotations. The one is configuration and the another one is enable auto configuration and the final one is component scan annotations with the default attributes. That means each annotation has its their own default attributes. The first and foremost is the algorithm of configurations. So the algorithm of configuration is a annotations. It indicates that the class contain configuration methods. That means the class which is annotated with the algorithm of configurations, it contains bean classes and not a bean classes, bean methods. And that will be proceded by the Spring container during application context initializations. So it will Spring Boot automatically take care of the algorithm for configurations. And the another one is enable auto configurations. So enable auto configuration means the Spring container will automatically configure all the bean methods and classes automatically. So this is based its class path and its dependencies. So based on the dependencies which were in the form.xml and the class where it will automatically configure entire project. And the final one is a component scan. So component scan annotations, it is nothing but an annotation which can be used to scan the specified package or its sub-package for Spring components such as controller services repositories. So which are the default components, so which can be automatically scanned by the Spring Boot internally. So if you see the diagram, so this is the diagram, Spring Boot application annotation. So it is a combination of authority of Spring Boot configuration or enable auto configurations and authority of component scan. So this is the basic example that is called main applications. So see that here we enable the class level annotations. So that means authority of Spring Boot applications. So whenever we indicate to upgrade a Spring Boot application at the class level, the Spring Boot will consider this is the main class of the project. So the Spring Boot applications, so default it has a one method run method, so which can take care of the application to run the Spring Boot application. On the another annotation, which is a widely used annotations, is nothing but a thread of auto-wide. So actually, this annotation is used to dependency injections. So it can be applied at to field level or setter level or constructor level also. So at the rate of auto-wide indicating that the Spring container should automatically write the dependencies at runtime. So during the runtime, it will automatically write the dependencies at runtime. So yeah, the actually algorithm of auto-wide annotations was introduced in the Spring 2.5 versions. So as I told you, it is widely used in the Spring Boot applications. So which are based on convenient war configurations and aim to simplify the development of Spring-based applications. So in the Spring Boot era, so the developer no need to concentrate much about the configurations. So this is the one of the main advantage. So by using annotations, developer no need to configure. So the developer need to only concentrate on business logic. So the entire configurations will automatically take by the auto-wide applications. So as I told, we can inject to dependencies injections so two different ways. One is a field level injections, and the another one is setter level injections. So if you see the field level injections, we have user. So for example, we have a one service class, user service this class. So obviously the survey class need to communicate with the database. That means repository dependencies. So here user services depending on the user repositories. So for that we initialized the two user repository interfaces and we annotated with two data for auto-wide. So by doing that, we can use properties and methods and features of the user repositories interfaces. This is the field level injection. And the another one is setter level injections or constructor level injections. It is similar to the field level injections, but in the setter level injections, we need to use setter and getter methods like that. So here we use the set user repository setter and we pass it the user repository interface as an argument. And finally, inside the set user repository, we initialize the user repository. So it is annotated with the author of auto-wide. So, and finally, other methods using user repository. That means here we can write our business logics using the user repositories. And the REST controller. So REST controller, it is in a nowadays the REST controller annotations are used widely rise because nowadays every applications are running on the internet web applications. So REST controller. So actually it is an annotations in the Spring framework. So in a Spring, we have a lot of modules. Among those, that MVC model is one part. So Spring Frame. So this update of REST controller is used to create RESTful web services. So RESTful web services, that means representation entity transfer. So that means one services can communicate with to another while using the HTTPs loosely coupled. So it is a specialization version of control annotations under response body. So that means so REST control is a combination of rate of controller annotation and rate of response body annotations. So whenever you annotated class as a rate of REST controller annotations, it indicates that the class is responsible for handling all incoming and outgoing HTTP request and producing the corresponding response directly in the form of JSON. Suitable RESTful services typically mostly using JSON and XML formats. So here we need to understand order of what is controller and order of response body. So actually order of control annotation. It is an annotation is used to define a class as a controller in a Spring MVC. So that means in a Spring MVC, it is one controller class can control the all the methods inside the controller class. So inside controller class, we have a lot of methods for handling each and every logic. On the response body. So actually response body, it is used to indicate that the return value of a method. So whenever we call one controller method, so it will automatically process the logic and definitely finally, it has to return some output. So that output is called response body. So that output should be serialized directly to the HTTP response body. So for that, this authorate of response body annotation is used. And so is the example. So in the example, we have my controller. So public class, my REST controller. So this is the my controller class, which is annotated with the authorate of REST controller. So inside the REST controller, I have some endpoint methods. That one endpoint method is say allow endpoint method. So which is annotated with the authorate of hello, authorate of get mapping annotations with the URL allow slash. And so if whenever the user hit the specific URL, so that corresponding method will execute and it will return the hello world result. So this role, so this result, as I said, this result is the authorate of response body. So authorate of response body, so that result will be serialized directly into the HTTP response body. And so request mapping. So in the previous slide, we have discussed about the REST controller. So REST controller, it is this is to handle all the incoming request and responses also. So we have another term called is request mapping. So for example, if we have a URL, so we need to hit the URL. For that, we need to use request mapping. So actually, algorithm request mapping is an annotations in the Spring framework. So it is used to map HTTP request to specific handler method in a controller class. So as I said, in the controller class, we have a lot of controller method, specific control method. So in order to call a specific controller method, we need to use request mapping annotations. So there is the here it is saying C used to map every incoming HTTP request to specify specific handler method in the controller class. So it allows you to define how different types of HTTP requests. So we have a different type of HTTP requests out there, guys. So among those, the mostly widely used are get, post, put, delete, patch. These are the widely used HTTP request methods. So these are the handled by the Spring MVC controller. So actually the authorate of a request mapping annotation can be applied at the class level and are also method level. So authorate of a request controller. So this authorate of request controller annotation we can use only at the class level. But whereas this authorate of a request mapping annotations, you can use both to class level as well as a method level. So this is the syntax for the request mapping. So we need to annotate it with the request mapping and we need to give the URL. So this is the syntax. Under some, as I said, some of the method level mappings are at the rate of a get mapping and post mapping, put mapping, delete mapping. So every mapping, so every HTTP mapping has some unique URL. So the unique URL should be unique. then only the request mapping will be able to map the specified request and then process the result, and finally it will give the result back to the HTTPs. The serializable format like with JSON or XML, as I said in the slide, REST controller. So the next one, annotations are nothing but at the rate of service and at the rate of repository. So actually at the rate of service. So actually it is an annotations provided by the Spring Boot internally. So basically it is used to indicate that the class is a service component in a Spring Boot application. So service components. So that means service component typically refers to the our business logic. So if you want to build any web applications, we need to write some business logic. So all those logics are written inside the service class. So service components typically contain business logic and service-oriented functionalities and are responsible for processing and mapping application-specific tasks. So whatever logic guys we are going to implement, all logic should be written inside the update of a service class. So the Spring Boot content will internally will scan the update of service class. And another one is a repository. So it is a similar to service annotation. So the main difference is, so after writing our logic, so definitely the logic should be interact with our database. So for that, we need to use update of repository annotations. So basically, update of repository is an annotations which are provided by the Spring Boot internally. So it indicates that this repository is will able this repository interface class will be able to communicate or interact with our database by specifying some properties like username, database URL, and password. So the upgrade of repository annotation is used to indicate that a class is a repository component in a Spring application. So Spring components are responsible for encapsulating data access logic, interacting with the database and other data sources, and performing CRUD operations. CRUD operation, create, read, update. So basically here, whenever the class is annotated to the update of a repository, so that class will be automatically scanned by the Spring Boot container. So who can perform some CRUD applications like create, update, to delete, and read operations. So it can able to uh, write our logic into the database and it can interact with our database also. So at the rate of repositories annotation, that is the use of at the rate of repository. And the another one is, so if you see the example, so here in the service app, so we have a user service class. We have annotated with the update of a service class. So inside service class, we can write our logic, business logic, and methods, whatever we want. So then obviously this business logic should be interact with the database. So for that, we have again here, we define an interface called user repository, which is annotated with the upgrade of repository annotation. So basically, in a latest version of a Spring Boot, it is optional whether you annotated interface as a repository or not. The Spring Boot will internally will select, yeah, this is the interface, this is the repository class by seeing extend some repositories, JPA repositories. So actually JPA repository, we have some repositories called JPA repository and the CRUD repository. So these are the repositories which can provide some CRUD operations methods. So in the last session, the last slide, we see that performing CRUD. So if you want to perform some basic CRUD operations, we can use JPA repository. So that the JPA repository will accept to generic type. So user, we need to give the which class. So which class and their primary key. So inside we can give the database methods, whatever the methods, we can have a lot of methods to interact with the database like find the name, save the record by name, different methods you can write. But this JPA repository default provide some methods which are used to performing CRUD operations. And the next one is the most one, my favorite one is what is command line interface, command line runner. So actually, command line runner is an annotations. It is a inbuilt command line runner in the Spring Boot framework. So for example, in the first slide we have talked about. So the class which is annotated with the upgrade of a Spring Boot applications, the Spring Boot container will consider it is the main class. So whenever we run our applications, in that case, if you want to perform any additional task before the actual process running, in that case, we can use at the rate of command, not at the rate of command line runner interface. So actually, command line runner is an interface in the Spring Boot framework. So that provide a way to execute code after Spring Boot application has started. So as I said, whenever the application Spring Boot application started, so this command line runner will execute the first whatever you write, whatever you build inside the command line method, it will execute first. So it is a particularly useful for performing any initialization or a startup task that need to be happen once the application context is fully loaded. So, for example, before running any Spring Boot applications, I want to initialize the object into my entity classes. For example, so if you don't want to interact with our database, in that case, we can assign objects to the entity classes. In that case, we can use command line runner interface. So actually command line interface has only one single method that is called run method, void run method. So see the basic example of command line runner is, so just we need to implement command line interface, then it will automatically implement the run method. So inside run method, we can write our some logics or some codes, some initialization objects, whatever we want. So whatever you written inside the run method, it will execute first. Yeah, that's it for today, guys. So before ending the sessions, I want to recap all those concepts with an example. So let's dive into the example. So for demonstrations, I have built a one POC project. So as I told, these Spring Boot application annotations. So my class name is POC demo application. So this class is annotated with the Spring Boot applications. So it have actually this process will automatically done by the Spring container automatically. We don't have to manually annotated with this class. So here I implemented the command line liner. As I told, I want to write something on the console before executing the logics. So inside so this is the our main class. From here, our project will bootstrap. So the Spring Boot application has a one method that is the run method. So this run method will execute the our class, that is POC demo application class runs. So before this, whenever this process happen, then it will execute this method, run method, and it will print the first statement exit. First statement will execute. So I have a controller, controller package, and one Pojo class, the repository, and the service as I said. So I have a one entity class. So I have a project class. So Pojo. So for that, this class will automatically converted into the database object. So for that, I have enabled, I use upgrade of entity. So this entity is used to convert our project class to database object. And I have used to all arguments, no arguments, this all arguments. So and I have declared three fields. One is ID, name, and address. For ID, I have used upgrade of ID, which is indicate that this is the primary key. So finally, I have a repository class. So repository class, the reason why I declare repository class means I need to interact with the database. So I need to store my student data into database. For that, I need to interact with the database. So for that, I created one interface that is called student repo, and I extended JPA repository. So as I told, so JPA repository, and the another one is CRUD repositories. So this repositories will provide default methods to perform CRUD operations on a specific class. So in my case, I specified the class, this class. So I want to perform some basic CRUD operations on this class. The primary key is integer. So here notice I didn't annotated this class as a repository because it is an optional whether you provide or not. The Spring container will automatically take care this. This is the repository by seeing this extend JPA repository interface class. So for typing, I don't have any methods inside the student repo because JPA will automatically provide some CRUD operations. And here I have a student service. So student service. So student service. So student service class. Here I annotated with the update of service class. So as I told, the class which is annotated with the update of service. So the Spring container will take care that this is the business logic class. Inside the survey class, we can write our business logics. So here I wrote business logic. I want to save my student data into database. So I have written one method. So I pass the details, and here I use the report. So here I have used the dependency injections that is called uh, field level. So as I told, the device. So field level injection. So here I have used field level injection, dependency injection. So student service, obviously I have some student service. So I need to interact with those to the service to database. So for that, I injected student repo into the student service, and I annotated with the update of auto-wide annotations. Annotations. So because I need to use that properties and methods. So and finally inside the save student, I used a report.save method. So this save method, see this save method, it is a CRUD repository. So JP repository also there. So these methods are all provided by Inbit. We don't have to write to logically. So, and after saving the records, I am retaining data address, data added successfully. So next, finally, the student controller. Here, so our student controller class annotated with the update of REST controller. So as I said, REST controller. So whenever the class is annotated with the update of REST controller, so it will handle all incoming and outgoing HTTP requests under response by serializing the object into a corresponding format like XML JSON. So on the request mapping, so I need to map. So inside of student control, so for time being, I have only one method. So in a real world, we have a n number of methods inside the student control. So in order to map a specific method, we need to use the other rate of request mapping. So on the other request mapping, and here I have one endpoint that is called a get name. So actually it should be student. So name and this request body. So this annotation is used to accept the incoming request body, and this request body will help to transfer the object into corresponding JSON format. So whenever we whenever we re- whenever we given the request body, so this request body annotations will transfer into a JSON format. So that is the use of request body, and it will automatically, dynamically, it will happen. So I, here I accepting a student object, and I am using the student service class because inside the student service, we have a logic. So we need to use that logic. So here I have annotated with to rate of annotated y, and I have used the service that save student method, and I passed the student object, and finally I am returning student record added successfully. So student record added successfully. So for interacting the database, we need to provide some properties. So inside the properties class, we have a database credentials like URL, name, password, and JPA. We are generating SQL in the console level, and this is the Hibernate automatically updating. Whenever we modify any query, it will automatically update. And the format. So I want to show some format. So I enable this format. So whenever we run the prompt, it will execute from this point. So now we are going to see that. Click run as Spring Boot. See the output is first statement will execute. So this command line will inside whatever you written inside the run method, that content should display on the console first. So now our application is running successfully. Now we need to check. So for checking, I am going to use the Postman. So as I did, the default port is, so the default port number is 8080. So 8080. So that we need to use localhost HTTP localhost 8080. So and we are giving the request mapping. See that I need to map a specific method. For that, I give the here request mapping as a API test. So API test. So request mapping on the specified method URL. So that is the specified request mapping is post. So that's why it is a post request. So that's why post, and we need to change the HTTP method as a post, and we need to pass our data object. So for that, we need to use the body option. And for default, if you select it is a none, then we need to select the raw. And here we need to select by default, it will be the text. And we need to select the JSON format. JSON format, we need to give the data ID. So for 22 ECS address Chennai. Bangalore. So if we hit the enter, so we are getting that student record added successfully. Added successfully. So that's it, guys. That's it, guide today. So okay, if you have any queries and if you have any doubts, you can comment in the session. And you can, yeah, if you have any queries, you can comment in the chat. And please subscribe the PCS Global channel. Thank you guys for listening. Looking forward to the next session. Bye bye.